Welcome, Ecom Logistics Nation. Thank you for joining today's episode. We're on a mission to share e-commerce logistics insights, trends, successes, and challenges from the leaders and innovators in our space.
I think you have to take a really pragmatic view of it at this point, because with Gen AI, things are changing very fast. So in today's world, I wouldn't necessarily rely on Gen AI to get me 100% of the way there, but the potential is certainly there.
Welcome, Ecom Logistics Nation, to a very special episode from the JW Marriott in San Antonio, Texas, at the Manhattan Momentum 2024 conference. It has been exciting 3 days, some exciting announcements, some really fun times as well. This is a very special episode because I have two really special guests in front of me. I have Ryan Gifford, who's a director here, or a senior director here at Ninaad Associates, responsible for forecasting, replenishment, and allocation development, business development or sales. And then we also have Scott Fenwick, who's also a director, manages the planning product.
That's correct.
Absolutely. So why don't we just start with Ryan? How did you stumble into this?
Well, I actually started in CPG about 12 years, did a lot of category management, some marketing, forecasting, replenishment, of course. Got to work with a lot of retailers, big and small, mom and pops to tier one, super tier one organizations, and then made my way over into software about 6 years ago. Been doing forecasting replenishment software ever since.
That is awesome. Thank you. And how about you? Why don't you tell our audience a little bit about yourself? How long have you been at Manhattan?
Sure. So I've been around a long time. I've been around for 28 years, and that's through an acquisition. But I've been working with our forecasting and replenishment solutions since mid-90s, let's just say. I started my career as a software developer back in the late 80s, early 90s. And I got my first experience with a drug wholesaler, which is now one of our customers, I'm proud to say. And also spent some time with Sarah Lee right out of college, and I had a chance to work on their sales-driven reorder system, which is essentially a VMI tool. From a supply chain planning perspective, I ended up joining a small startup company back in the late 90s. It was called Supply Chain Solutions back then, which through many acquisitions over the years ended up becoming part of Manhattan. I've been doing product strategy for the majority of that time here with Manhattan, and I have had a chance to oversee some of our supply chain execution solutions for a while and some of our in-store solutions back in the early stages of those. But at my heart, I'm a supply chain planning guy, and I've spent most of my career doing that.
Amazing. And planning and replenishment. What's the announcement?
Yeah, so thank you. We are announcing Manhattan Active Supply Chain Planning, which is coming in Q4 of this year. This signifies a move to the Manhattan Active platform. So cloud-native microservices-based technology, which is a big overhaul for our solution set. We've also unified allocation, replenishment, demand forecasting. So we have actually been able to unify not just supply chain planning, but supply chain planning and execution. So imagine having a single demand forecast, a single supply plan that runs not just your procurement and replenishment, but also your labor, your transportation, your capacity planning, all facets of what it takes to not just procure inventory, but to move it, to handle it, to store it all the way through to your consumer.
My understanding is it's different pieces trying to brought together, including a whole bunch of Excel spreadsheets that run some of that, right? Because that level of end-to-end visibility and data and its understanding and unification didn't exist with that.
That's a fair assessment. Our approach here was unification of business planning, so unified business planning. The purpose is really to provide real-time insights throughout the entire ecosystem, from warehouse management, labor, slotting, transportation, and then also with supply chain planning. The ultimate goal there is to reduce silos. The whole goal for every organization is to improve the way that we're doing things. It made sense that we infuse the rest of our applications with planning. So reduction of silos, additive data in real time.
That is pretty phenomenal. And then I've had some background working specifically in the replen space. So maybe if you could explain how much change are we seeing with both compute, the cloud compute power, because one of the retailers that I worked with in the past used a FNR solution or forecasting replenishment solution that ran on, literally required 4 Unix frames that ran through its complete capacity on processing side because it was calculating every single night billions of permutations to create a plan for procurement on the other side. And then that too needed to be validated by humans the next day. How much has changed? Can you help explain on that front that compute's changed, right?
It has changed. So with the cloud architecture, we've approached the problem in a completely different way. So bye-bye batch job. We no longer have a process that needs to run overnight. So as things change, conditions change, whether it's sales or inventory data or opportunities to go react to real-time disruption within the supply chain, our system reacts in real time. So to the idea of having a nightly job, just as you described, that's gone.
I have story time on this. This one retailer, there were a bunch of Unix batch job developers combined with service bus developers that were doing pulls from different systems to kind of amalgamate this data and these jobs at sequences. And imagine each job being represented on a poster as one box, which is, let's call it 2-inch by 1-inch process flow diagram. The diagram itself was probably 12 feet long, with each box being that small and no space left on that entire poster sheet. That's how much coordination of job execution happened to just collect the data, to feed the forecasting system, to then execute the procurement plan overnight. I'm guessing machine learning plays a big part in this.
It absolutely does in a couple of ways. Obviously, the machine learning enables us to make different and better decisions. It enables us to leverage data, some structured, some unstructured, in ways that even just several years ago would have been almost impossible. It helps our optimization engines and forecasting and on the replenishment side to just make better decisions. But there's also some intelligence that's built into the platform. So you asked about the compute power, but the platform actually has the ability to expand and contract as it senses changes in volume, whether the volume is based on the number of users that are hitting the system or the volume being maybe we just got a big dump of data from our customer, which we then have to process and assess. And so the system can kind of dynamically flex. And that takes intelligence that's been built into the platform as well.
And one of the stats that I'm reading right now, a McKinsey report highlighted that companies using AI-driven forecasting saw a 30% reduction in stockouts and overstock situation. Anything to highlight on that front? Like, where is the holy grail to start with? But like the low-hanging fruit, it seems like it is planning.
I think that this replenishment or this forecast is going to apply, but we can take some of the gut instinct out and start to leverage the math and the science that's actually there. What is the data actually telling us? When you do that at scale, it starts to make really good improvements in decisions, right? Because we're not talking about one product in one location. We're talking about entire categories or departments that could impact thousands of items. And that starts to lead into your warehouse and your distribution center, your transportation, labor impact. So we're not just going to see inventory reduction being held at locations. We're also going to see a bit more seamless communication between all components of the architecture, making better decisions. That's really where we're driving. And that's what the automation and the AI is going to help drive.
Anything to say from your standpoint on like the AI implementation? I'm guessing you're looking at it at a great amount of depth, right?
We are. Yeah, there's another aspect to it as well in terms of how Gen AI can change the user's experience with the systems itself. So imagine being able to have natural language conversations with the system to not just understand how to better use the system, how to understand new capabilities. Those are certainly kind of the easier things that we think are going to be achievable. But then imagine being able to use those same types of interfaces to have conversations with your data, if you want to think about it that way. Understand why things are happening, why I'm seeing the results that I am. And we see a ton of potential with Gen AI to help facilitate those types of interactions. So it's kind of being able to hit it from both sides. We're leveraging the power of the machine learning and the AI to go yield better answers and better results based on the massive amounts of data that are available, but also being able to provide much more intuitive and natural interactions with the system itself.
And there's that little nuance specifically on that front, right? There, Gen AI, you have to ask, and it shall respond. When we talk about standard machine learning models, it is essentially, it can be prescriptive back to you to say, how do you see that evolve as a supply chain analyst who's responsible for procurement, a category buyer, right, that's now looking at a plan that's been produced? Do you see a Gen AI type interaction to say, what are you doing here? Why did I get this? Why am I buying? And I love using this because this is a scenario I've gone through. Somehow a planning system, terrible planning system, not Manhattan, ended up producing a result saying, hey, you are getting a great deal on these big Barbie trucks. So let's order 12 container loads of it. And the analyst said, okay, that's a great deal. Let's go purchase it, right? This is a really extreme scenario, but that plan being produced, is it conversational or it comes back to, hey, but here are some watch outs, right? Like I'm giving you this flexibility, patterns, changes, seasonality, whatever might be coming in play, along with the plan to say the risk factor, confidence level, all of that stuff, right?
Yeah, I think you have to take a really pragmatic view of it at this point for a couple of reasons, because with Gen AI, things are changing very fast. So in today's world, I wouldn't necessarily rely on Gen AI to necessarily get me 100% of the way there, but the potential is certainly there. So in our point of view, we want to rely on the strength of the engines themselves, which certainly will have AI infused in them to go make better decisions. The key, though, whether it's driven by ML or just more optimization, is the transparency that's made available to the end user. And that can be achieved in a number of ways. Gen AI is certainly one, but there's certainly others. But the key is to make sure that the analyst understands, why is the system making the recommendation it is? How much influence are these other factors potentially having on that decision? Because as Ryan said, there's always going to be a rationality, a gut check, or something that needs to be quantified and substantiated by the system. But if you provide the level of transparency back to the user so they understand, these are the results, this is how we got there, then at least there's a bit of a journey that has to happen, a change management that has to happen so that we can all build confidence in what the results are showing us.
I love it. I want to see the future faster. Right, yeah. Exactly. Maybe back to you here, Ryan. Let's talk a little bit about, like, we have seen historically this from an enterprise productization or product implementation strategy, a combination of what you would consider best of breed hodgepodge together to bring together your supply chain systems, right? You might have one WMS, another F&R solution, you might have a TMS from the third company, right? And now you got like this enterprise service bus trying to coordinate all of this along with the ERP communication that's happening. The value to the client. Can you?
Yeah, I think it's tremendous. I think something we haven't hit on here is that it was part of Eddie's keynote speech, is that this is versionless. You're going to get upgrades every 90 days, but this isn't taking the system down and then installing a new upgrade. You can keep running. You're not really even going to notice that an upgrade occurred, other than there's a couple more feature functions that are happening there. Now we have the ability to ingest real-time information. So if you have an emergency in the middle of the night, while you were doing your batch job and you can't go in and look at the system and try and figure something out because the system's uploading the information, what a big stress relief, right? You're becoming more proactive by having all of these parts talking to each other all the time. You can start to make in-day decisions that might affect things later in the same day. There's labor impact here. I think one of the examples we've touched on is if your team is in the distribution center and they're picking orders, maybe they start to fall behind. Not enough people staffed that day. A couple people called out. They're not getting every item onto every truck. Do you want your team that's in the warehouse picking orders making the decision as to which items are making it or not making it? Or would you like the system to say, hey, here are the items that have to go?
Yep.
There's a real need here. And these are the items that can wait until tomorrow. Let's dynamically ship tomorrow. But for right now, let's alter the pallets and what is remaining to go out today so that we can get that out in the most effective and meaningful way. You haven't had the ability to do that. And if you've got segmented, as you mentioned, different ERP, WMS, TMS systems, they don't necessarily have the ability. They're fine. They all work. Got plenty of customers using different pieces. But when you put them all together, you're going to get a different outcome.
Just to extend that particular scenario, does it play out in a way where the bane of my existence for the longest time, once an order in WMS is in release status, right, you can still make changes. But once it's in execution status, you cannot make changes. And there are really good reasons why. But if a plan was to change dynamically, right, that prioritization could even control down to the level to say, hey, let's do, based on certain planning parameters and design, to say, let's do balancing where it's still critical. I can't meet the demand from this site because I have a capacity problem because of resourcing, but there's another site which I can actually fall back onto, right? And it would make that decision, or it could recommend that decision, right?
No, that's absolutely correct. The key there is the ability to not just understand what has changed, but the ability to understand where we are in that process in the warehouse fulfillment. Because as you noted, appropriately, there will be a point in time where it's too late. We can't change it. It's on the truck. It's ready to go. But up until that point, if we have a communication, what we call a bidirectional coordination going on between WMS in that case and supply chain planning, then we can understand what those limits are. And it's been interesting because you could describe that integration bus, but if you look at the direction the industry has been going for a while, there's been attempts with things like S&OP and S&OE to kind of have almost a after the fact or reactionary realignment between operations, logistics, finance, and supply chain planning. Most of that, in my opinion, is because all of those plans aren't unified to begin with. And so we have to periodically get together to reconcile, are we on track or are we not? Do we need to make adjustments? Integrated business planning, same kind of concept, right? It's the need to stitch all these things together. In an integrated format, it's almost impossible to have the real-time knowledge of, can I still adjust this order in a warehouse? It has to be built in a way to get to a point where these solutions can communicate in real time. Because if you're waiting for that data to make its way through the integration bus to get to the other end and get a response back, that's probably too late.
It is too late.
It's not fast enough.
Absolutely. And the decision, adding that layer of like constant bye-bye bad jobs, right? That constant evaluation and assessment rather than like waiting for something to run in the background, right? Like it's very much predictive, reactive at that point to be able to make some real-time decisions while also be taken into consideration long-term goals and objectives that the supply chain teams put in place, right? One more technical on that front. So my understanding of all active products, or at least I've always said it in the past, like this is back in the days, right? It's either you can get highly configurable or you can get extensible. The choice to have both was not available. With proactive as a solution, there is extensibility that is getting added to this. So from a planning perspective, definitely the legacy solutions, because now we can call the other solutions legacy, of course, right? Technically speaking, right? With the new stuff coming out right now.
It feels old, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly, right? With the change that's happening, proactive is a toolkit that's available for extensibility across all active platforms, and I would assume it's in planning as well.
Correct. Yep.
I don't even think anyone has an extensible planning solution other than configurable out in the market. Of course, WMSs, there have been things of that nature. So how much of a difference does this make from a customer's perspective to have a planning solution in the cloud that is configurable but also extensible, that is hyper integrated into, if you so choose to have a single solution provider across your execution systems or across your supply chain systems?
I'll give you my thoughts, Ryan. You can weigh in. Sure. I think it's certainly one of those aspects of being a game changer. The configurability aspect has certainly been something we've put a lot of thought into, and just the configuration management. But the ability to extend and then have those extensions survive upgrades, and with the guarantee that those extensions will never break, that's a big deal for every customer, irrespective of the domain. Now, the types of extension we've seen historically in our supply chain planning business, it's different than how you might see it in a warehouse management or an order management deployment, absolutely. But it's still important, and it's still important to the customers just to understand that the things that make their business special and unique, and things that they may wish to approach in a unique way, to know that they have that flexibility now with zero added tax that's going to get added to every time we upgrade. That's a fantastic benefit.
Makes a lot of sense. And from your perspective?
But I was going to use the unique business rules. Some organizations have requirements within their day-to-day that they want that are particular to them. And sometimes maybe they don't feel comfortable sharing that in front of maybe a product council or a larger group of people. That's something that they want to take in-house. They've got the ability to do both, right? They can share it with their peers or they can keep it in-house, but that they are able to address their particular needs. So low code, no code, your code, and without breaking the core of the system.
Absolutely. Before I was a partner, I've been a customer for decades. And it has always been a challenge from our perspective. It's like pay for an extension or actually ask for it to be in the core. And it's my secret sauce. I want to keep it to myself. It's not about the money, right? At that point, it's like, this particular business nuance is my secret sauce, and I'm gonna keep it to myself. So, of course, that's always going to happen. So that is very interesting. And maybe one of the last questions for both of you: how do you see supply chain of the future? Right, like is the grander macro vision, and maybe I'll start with you. What do you see?
So I think for me personally, when you look at kind of the global picture, right, everything's getting faster. We need the access to information quicker. That's a big reason why we did this. I think that we need to be able to respond in a much more meaningful way and more informed. We've discussed this week the blue dot consumer, and you think of yourself as a little bubble on a map, and I want this thing and I want it now. How can I get it? The store nearby have it? No. Can I get it shipped to home before I get to the house? Is one of the quick serve going to deliver it, go puff, DoorDash somebody? So when you think about the different ways that consumers are taking things in, we need the ability to respond nearly as quickly as we're getting that information. I think that's where we're headed. The faster that we can see data, the quicker we can respond to it, and we can allow teams and enable teams to have that information. And when you look at a little higher level, kind of circling back to this idea of unified business planning, giving sales leadership snapshots and views into what the impact of these decisions are on their business, right? They need to know that they're making sound decisions for their organizations. And so having real-time information and dashboards built specifically for this really enables them to understand their business, what their needs are, maybe where their challenges and pain points are. So it's not just meeting the consumer where they are, but also enabling organizations to work smarter and faster. I've discussed a bit about green is good and you can save money, or the environment. So we're streamlining and making things easier and faster. And I think that's going to drive better outcomes. And I think at the end of the day, that's what we want.
Hey, you hit on something really critical. We talk about it all the time. Is green is good, right? Like that aspect of it. It's also profitable now to do it the right way. Like it wasn't the case back in the days, right? Now it is genuinely something that makes sense. Like for you to be able to install solar on your warehouse roof, the return on investment is probably less than the lease term of that particular site. Now it makes sense, and it did back in the days. And green is good from where do you use electric fleets? How much should you use electric fleet, right? That's planning actually, right? To be able to push the limits.
Right. If we're able to do better, see better, react better, maybe some of these things just get naturally streamlined, right? And so maybe somebody's initial intent wasn't necessarily I'm reducing carbon emissions or fuel. It was just, how do I get trucks off the road? And that's a green as in dollars savings, but inadvertently you're doing both. And so I think people go into things with different intent. Maybe they want a carbon reduction and it just happens to be that they're saving money, or maybe they want to save money and they happen to be helping the environment. But in either outcome, we're doing things better, more responsible.
Love it. How about you? Where do you see the puck going?
I think there's also a big organizational change that's coming. We all talk about silos, and we see this as a technology enabler to reduce silos. The whole idea of this bi-directional coordination is how can we make better decisions from a planning perspective and from an execution perspective by better understanding each other's constraints. And I do think there will still be a logistics team, an operations team, absolutely, but I think it'll fundamentally change how those teams are compensated, how those teams are coordinated at different levels. Just to go back to the example I used earlier where we leverage these S&OP processes or S&OE processes to realign periodically. Imagine if we were able to really better understand what the company's objectives are and what the goals are, and have all of these systems kind of unite to go drive decisions that are aligned with that, versus me focusing on my inventory carrying costs, operations worried about labor spend. If there was a way to unite that and approach that in a different way, there's a big change management coming on the organizational side.
100%. Like I this idea, right? Maybe the last word from me on that front is there is AI individually embedded in things, but there can be a supply chain AI, the brain that actually looks across everything and says, what am I doing? And I think it becomes more than an assistant, because we are still thinking about it as an assistant. Or we can get to a stage where it knows collectively more. Look at some of these examples out in the market today where it actually knows more precise decision-making power than we do. And we should be comfortable with it, right? Like, I don't think it's something to fear. It's something to accept and say it's a new way of working. And organizational realignment will be part of that play as that happens. I'm excited for the future. As a closing statement, if you wouldn't mind just sharing, how can people reach you?
Yeah, absolutely. You can visit us on manage.com. There is a landing page dedicated to the launch of the product. You also go under the Solutions tab and you can pick forecasting replenishment. There's a Contact Us button at the bottom of that. Me personally, I'm on LinkedIn. Scott's on LinkedIn. So yeah, however you pick and choose, we're available.
Amazing. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Ninaad Acharya, CEO and co-founder of Fulfillment IQ. And I'm here with
Dan Call, CRO and partner at Fulfillment IQ. We're the team behind the Ecom Logistics podcast. Our mission is to provide you with genuine insights from our work alongside logistics leaders to help you improve your supply chain.
In the Ecom Logistics podcast, we share the knowledge and the insights we've gained from working alongside amazing brands, retailers, 3PLs, and VCs, so you can make the most out of your supply chain journey.
If you like what you're hearing, we'd truly appreciate your support with a 5-star rating on your favorite podcasting channel. Your feedback not only keeps us going, but also helps others find the podcast. If you think Fulfillment IQ can assist you, or if you have an idea related to logistics, just reach out to us on LinkedIn. We're always up for a chat and ready to explore new possibilities together.
Stay tuned to the Ecom Logistics podcast on your favorite podcast platform for fresh and practical insights into e-commerce and logistics. Until next time, let's keep making a difference.